The weight of Shreveport hung heavy in the humid Louisiana air, a palpable sense of timelessness that coiled around the city's bones like kudzu. It was mid-June, the heat already hanging heavy, clinging to the skin, as sticky as the underbelly of a forgotten dream. In a small, nondescript office nestled between a dingy bar and an old bookstore, he sifted through the murky details of his newest case. Files were strewn across his worn-out desk, the stark fluorescent light throwing long, ghoulish shadows on the faded wallpaper. A scent of stale coffee and unfulfilled promises permeated the room. He was a handsome man, touched slightly by age, his face lined with a wisdom that belied his youth. Yet beneath the hardened surface was an undertow of kindness, an open heart that had seen too much but refused to look away. Across town, the Cypress Grove Mall hummed with a sense of self-importance, echoing with the drone of anonymous conversations. On the surface, it was a bastion of capitalism, a shrine to mindless consumption. Yet there was a scent of decay clinging to it, a dark seepage in the air that gnawed at the edges of reality. An old friend, a beat cop with weary eyes and a graying mustache, had directed him toward the mall. "Something's off, kid," he had mumbled, his eyes reflecting a vague fear that transcended his hardened exterior. In the labyrinthine corridors of the mall, amid the neon lights and endless cacophony, our protagonist found himself adrift in a sea of faces. He weaved through the crowd, the echoes of his past brushing against him like phantoms. A child's laughter reminded him of a time when he had been happy, a time before the trauma that had hollowed him out, leaving a raw wound that refused to heal. A pockmarked dealer, more ghost than man, whispered hushed conversations into the ear of a too-young girl near the food court. There was an urgency in his movements, a desperation that mirrored the harsh realities of Shreveport. "The game is rigged, darling," he heard him mutter as he passed by, a chill sinking into his gut, a sense of dread entangling with his own demons. The evening crawled slowly, as if the city was holding its breath. There was a cadence in the hum of the city, a rhythm that pulsed with life, yet hinted at something darker, something he couldn't quite touch but could feel, gnawing at the periphery of his senses. It was as if Shreveport was not just a city, but a living entity, shrouded in a veil of mystery that he was just beginning to unveil. He returned to his office late, the darkness a soothing balm to his jangled nerves. There was something more to the case, something that twisted in his gut like a worm. He could feel it, a looming presence that danced at the edges of his consciousness, whispering of things to come. His dreams were fragmented, haunted by formless shadows and indistinct whispers. He found himself back in the maze of the mall, but it was distorted, an uncanny mirror of reality. As he wandered, he heard a distant sound, a soft, sinister melody played on a broken piano that seemed to seep through the very walls, echoing through the twisted corridors. It was the symphony of dread, the lullaby of the unquiet mind. He woke up in a cold sweat, the early morning light slicing through the blinds. The dream lingered like an afterimage, a haunting melody that set the tone for the new day. He couldn't shake off the feeling that he was not just an investigator, but a key part of the puzzle. The lines between the hunter and the hunted blurred as he prepared to delve deeper into the mystery that lay within the heart of the Cypress Grove Mall. The game had just begun, and he was but a pawn on a chessboard larger and far more terrifying than he could fathom. Morning had broken over Shreveport, the city awaking like a dreaming giant, all drowsy and rumbling. Yet the specter of unease persisted within him, a phantom gnawing at his senses, drawing him towards the Cypress Grove Mall. It was an unnatural allure, as if the mall held the answers to questions he had yet to voice. He stepped onto the sun-bleached concrete of the mall, the edifice before him both familiar and disquieting. There was a whispering hum of normalcy, people streaming in and out, their voices mingling with the mundane melody of everyday life. But beneath the veneer of the ordinary, the unseen threads began to pull, guiding him further into the maze. His interactions with the mall's inhabitants were marked by strange coincidences and veiled meanings. He met with a janitor, an old man whose eyes held an unsettling gleam of understanding. "The walls, they listen, son," he confided in a voice that sounded like ancient parchment being crumpled. A shiver ran through our protagonist, the words resonating with the dread lodged deep within his heart. The dealer he had seen earlier was found dead, a victim of an apparent overdose. His face held an expression of abject terror, the look of a man who had gazed upon something far more horrific than death itself. A few curious onlookers mumbled prayers, their whispered pleas to higher powers echoing hollowly within the now sinister walls of the mall. His investigation took him to dark corners, places where the mall showed its true colors. Here the bright fluorescents were replaced by a sickly pallor, the lively chatters by an oppressive silence. Each discovery of another victim, each terrified whisper of the mall's dark deeds, twisted the knot in his gut tighter. It was a symphony of shadows, a dance of dread that was slowly unveiling the hidden horror. Amidst this spiral of dread, a dark revelation emerged. The antagonist, a sinister figurehead of the drug ring, had been aware of him all along. He was not an unexpected inconvenience, but the anticipated guest. He felt the gaze of an unseen observer prickle his skin, the sense of being watched never leaving him. Even in sleep, the torment continued. His dreams became a theater of terror, the mall transforming into an otherworldly labyrinth that echoed with malicious laughter. The antagonist, a faceless figure in his nightmares, mocked his struggle with a chilling satisfaction, his voice a guttural growl that slithered along the corridors of his mind. "You're playing our game, detective." His waking moments became haunted by an awareness of the unseen. He could feel it, like a moth fluttering against a lampshade, the hum of an insidious presence that gnawed at his sanity. The dividing line between the reality and the surreal began to blur, each day drenched in a wash of unease, each night saturated with a dread that clung to him like a second skin. He was left teetering on the edge of a terrifying abyss. The whispers of the unseen were growing louder, the threads pulling him deeper into the realm of the uncanny. He was no longer the investigator. He had become a part of the mystery, a pawn in a dark, twisted game that was far from over. The Cypress Grove Mall, once a beacon of commercialism, was now a doorway into a terrifying realm that danced on the edges of his comprehension. He stood on the precipice of the unknown, a descent into madness awaiting him as he dared to pry further into the heart of darkness. Dawn broke over Shreveport, a tired sun rising over the slumbering city, casting long shadows that echoed the dark pallor enveloping his heart. He stood before the Cypress Grove Mall. Its innocuous facade belied the turmoil within. His mind was a whirl of fear, anticipation, and an unnerving determination that gnawed at his sanity. As he delved further into the labyrinth of the mall, the confines of the familiar began to warp and distort, reflecting the twisting turmoil of his own psyche. The mall was no longer a shrine of capitalism, it was a cathedral of cosmic horror. The bright neon signs flickered with an unnatural light, the cheerful stores twisted into grotesque parodies of reality, and the crowds became faceless, marionettes dancing to a tune composed in the depths of the abyss. The walls breathed with a life of their own, whispering tales of a power so ancient and fearsome that it gnawed at the edges of his comprehension. His conversations with the increasingly terrified inhabitants painted a horrifying picture. A force beyond their understanding controlled the drug dealers. The victims were merely offerings, their terror and despair feeding the malevolent entity that lurked within the heart of the mall. His dreams were no longer mere nightmares. They were a terrifying reality bleeding into his waking hours. The puppet master of the drug ring revealed his true form, an emissary of a monstrous power, an entity that defied understanding. The antagonist reveled in his dawning comprehension, his laughter echoing through his dreams. "You are chosen. You are marked. You are ours." The once kind and open-minded investigator was drawn into the maw of the cosmic horror, his spirit crumbling under its malevolent influence. The borders between himself and the entity blurred, his sense of self dissolving in its chaotic wake. His noble intentions, the hope to make a better world, were twisted, reshaped into a horrifying parody of his former aspirations. His friends and acquaintances watched in helpless horror as the man they knew was consumed by the cosmic terror. His PTSD, once a private battle, became a public spectacle of his descent into madness. His struggle against the darkness echoed within the grim walls of the Cypress Grove Mall, an eerie testament to the terrifying power of the cosmic entity. As the chapter came to a close, he stood at the threshold of the final transformation. The kind-hearted man was no longer visible, consumed by a chilling duality of man and monster. He was being drawn into the heart of the abyss, the terrifying cosmic entity churning within him, yearning to manifest its horrifying power into the world. The world of Shreveport, once a charming tapestry of life, was now warped, distorted through the lens of the cosmic horror that held him in its grip. The terrifying crescendo was nigh, the city poised on the brink of a new and horrifying reality. The once selfless man, now a harbinger of chaos, was preparing to take his final plunge into the heart of the churning abyss. The city held its breath, unknowing and unsuspecting, as the dawn of a new and terrifying epoch loomed ominously on the horizon. The last vestiges of daylight faded over Shreveport, the city swallowed by a brooding darkness that seemed to echo the deepening turmoil in our protagonist's heart. He stood on the precipice, staring into the maw of the abyss, his humanity teetering on the brink of a terrifying transformation. Inside the Cypress Grove Mall, reality was a fractured mirror, each fragment reflecting a different facet of the terror unfolding within. The once thriving hub of consumerism had metamorphosed into an unholy cathedral, its dark spires reaching towards the heavens, whispering tales of horror and despair to the oblivious world beyond its confines. He could no longer separate himself from the entity. Its whispers were his thoughts, its desires were his desires. His dreams were a terrifying tableau of otherworldly horrors, an eternal nightmare from which there was no waking. The antagonist, the dark puppeteer of this horrifying drama, watched the transformation with glee, the corners of his lip curling into a malicious grin. "Welcome, detective," he cooed, his voice a cacophony of 1,000 tormented screams. "Welcome to the beginning of a new reality." Our protagonist, or what was left of him, plunged headlong into the abyss. He surrendered to the cosmic entity, allowing it to consume his very being, his every thought, his every emotion. His PTSD, once a haunting reminder of his humanity, was now a delicious morsel for the entity, a feast for the ancient horror that now claimed him. His transformation was a spectacle of grotesque beauty. He was no longer a man. He was an embodiment of cosmic terror, a terrifying manifestation of a power that existed beyond the confines of reality. His body twisted and contorted, his human form a mere shell for the horror that lurked within. The Shreveport that once was, now existed only as a spectral echo. The city was a canvas for the cosmic entity, its every street, its every building, twisted into a haunting testament of its terrifying power. The once kind and selfless investigator was gone. In his place stood a harbinger of cosmic terror, a living testament to a power that existed beyond human comprehension. The desire to create a better world was now a cruel irony. The protagonist's noble intentions twisted into a terrifying reality of a world under the grip of cosmic horror. His journey had come full circle, from the depths of human suffering, through the labyrinthine horrors of the Cypress Grove Mall, to the terrifying abyss of a cosmic entity. He was no longer an investigator, a pawn, or even a victim. He had become the cosmic horror, an eternal embodiment of a force that defied reality and understanding. In the end, all that was left was the void, a churning abyss of cosmic terror. The city of Shreveport, once a vibrant tapestry of life, was now a haunting symphony of dread, forever under the shadow of its newly born horror. The world continued to turn, oblivious to the transformation of a kind man into a terrifying entity, a living testament to a horror that lurked just beyond the veil of reality, waiting for its moment to consume the world in its terrifying embrace. We appreciate you tuning in. If you fancied the content, show your support with a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to keep up with our eerie adventures. Eldritch Tales Factory has plenty more to offer. Until next time.